Hello and welcome back to another deck building guide. This time we're going to take a look at Control. Now I believe that Control is one of the more difficult archetypes to build, simply because there's just so many things you need to consider when crafting your deck, and hopefully as I go through them in this guide it'll bring a bit of clarity and help you guys figure out how to build Control decks in Faeria. So let's get to it, get into the deck builder and figure out how to build a Control deck. Alright guys, let's start things off by talking about what is Control. Now that might seem a bit obvious to some, but I think it's important to establish what a Control deck does in order to win the game. Now Control decks are built as reactive decks. What I mean by that is they are going to be responding to your opponent's threats and questions, hoping to answer them and build up towards a win condition. And now these win conditions in Control usually have massive explosive effects, or just create very powerful creatures, and you have to hold your opponent off in order to, play something like this card, the Aurora's Dream. Now, win conditions are not just high in Faeria, they can also be high in land cost as well, which also requires time in order for you to build towards them. But yeah, that's one of the main things to remember about Control. You are a reactive type of deck. You are reacting to situations while you try to get enough time to build towards your win condition. Now, when you're building a Control deck, you're going to need a lot of specific things, and I've actually made a list here. So first things, which we just talked about, is the win condition. What type of win condition does your deck want, and how are you going to achieve that win condition before your opponent beats you down? Stuff like Aurora's Dream, for example. This is one of the more pricey win conditions in Faeria. And it has a high land cost, so 5 lakes, which is also quite restrictive in your deck building as well, so you need to take that into consideration, and also 20 for Faeria. But when you pull this card off, you get a massive Faeria reduction, depending on how expensive your hand is. So there's a big payoff for this card if you're able to pull it off, but you're going to have to get there first. So win conditions can vary very much. You can have, let's say for example, you have kind of a big win condition like the Aurora's Dream, but you can also have win conditions in a different Control archetype like Soul Eater. So Soul Eater isn't expensive in Faeria, but it's still expensive in lands and requires you to have 2 different types of lands. And depending on how you build these lands could lock out specific options in the early game, depending on how aggressive your opponent is. This gains power as creatures die, so you're going to have creatures die in order for this to gain enough strength in order to be a real threat. So there's another kind of condition here for Soul Eater to be an effective winning option. You need these creatures to die, which will take time. And that's one of the important things to consider with Control. Like, how much time does it take for you to win? So the Soul Eater is a very good example of a Control card. Green Yellow Sacrifice is traditionally a Control deck. It is a reactive deck. You are just sitting back, killing your own guys, sacrificing, killing your opponent's guys, trading off, and eventually slam that big Soul Eater. Other examples of win conditions which have more specific deck building requirements is Chaos. This Emperor Chaos from the Oversky expansion. 6 wildlands, so it gives you a bit of flexibility in how you build your deck. Production, give all enemy creatures -1/-0, then destroy all enemy creatures with 0 attack. Now a popular deck that uses this, or has built an archetype around this card, is Blue Control. And the reason is, if I can find the card here, bear with me. I've gone past it, haven't I? So the reason there it is, Imperial Engineer. Trigger all friendly production abilities. So you get to trigger that Chaos ability again, and you can also then, as well, on top of that, you can, let me get rid of the mythics here, it just makes things a bit easier. You can also use Aurora's Creation. So you can copy multiple Emperor Chaos, slam down that Imperial Engineer, and then maybe even trigger a board wipe on your opponent. So lots of different ways you can win the game, and it's really up to you to discover how how to find a win condition that is viable, but also a win condition that is going to have so much of an impact the opponent won't be able to recover from it. So next question, what does a control deck need? Now, control deck needs 3 specific types of cards. We just talked about the win condition, but the next type of card is removal. Now, in my deck building guide, I was talking about how green control is kind of bad. And the main reason is it just doesn't have enough removal options in its core color. It has the Deepwood Stalker, which is fantastic, but it's the only one real removal card it has right now. And if you go through Green's selection of cards, doesn't have much else as far as removal is concerned. And this is a big issue when it comes to building control decks, because you are reactive. You're a reactive player, and the best way to react to creatures is by killing them and removing them. So, like Deepwood Stalker, the only real viable green card, which is why we don't see a lot of mono green control. However, mono green control can utilize other cards that control decks need, which I'll go into a little bit later. So neutral has a few removal cards that you can utilize across all decks, which is why a card like Falcon Dive was so popular in mono green back in the day, because of the lack of removal options. So Falcon Dive is one of them. It's not used that much anymore because Emperor's Command is just much better for an extra Faeria. Does the same thing, plus you get some additional bonuses as well. So Emperor's Command is the more powerful version of Falcon Dive. We will probably see Falcon Dive in OTK decks if it's going to feature in anything at all. Punishment is also a strong card now, thanks to the strength of the Monkey and the Drake Rider. There's some very strong neutral creatures in the new expansion, so Punishment is also a very good option, but it's kind of bad. Outside of that, it's a more expensive Cypher's Wrath Soul Drain without its additional benefits, but still a removal option. Now, soft removal, as I like to call it, Crystal Flower. Swallow a creature. You know, this is fantastic card. Some players even say this card is too strong in some ways. But very good option for control decks that are building lands. You can swallow a threat, keep it out of the way for a while, get some time to either build up an answer for it later, or just build towards your own win condition. And yeah, we have the last big removal. Well, actually we have 2. We have Moby. So this is just a more impactful version of the Crystal Flower. But we also have stuff like the Yak Attack, for example. Yak Attack is a removal card, or it can be used as a removal card, and it has been utilized in blue control decks in the past, using the Yak Attack to trigger other win conditions. So there's some of the neutral options. Green, like I said, doesn't have much. Blue, on the other hand, has a few things to help it out. One of them, Hydra, can be considered as a removal option. It's a bit janky for that specific reason, but the little Hydra heads can remove stuff. We have Aurora's Trick. You could consider this removal because you are removing a threat from your opponent. It becomes yours, which is an added benefit, but it is some form of removal. Ninja Toad, a bit like Wind Soldier. Very solid removal option. I've been using this a lot in my blue decks recently. Frogify is soft removal. Doesn't completely kill it. You need to do something else, much like the Crystal Flower. Same with Mirror Phantasm as well, which is kind of a worse Frogify in some ways, but, you know, it's just what it is, right? You take what you can get. And I believe that's pretty much it for blue. Now, this is where these 2 colors here, red and yellow, have the most removal options, and it's probably their greatest strength when building control decks. Cypher's Wrath, Flame Burst, Derelict Tower, Firebomb. What else do we have down here? Blazing Salamander, Bomb Slinger, Firestorm, Ground Shaker, Havoc, Hellfire, Ignis, Garadan, to name a few. Meteor, one of the bigger... This is actually more of a win condition, but it doubles up as removal as well. Yellow has also a lot of great options as well as far as removal is concerned. Flash Salmon, Spirit Theft, Demonic Salmon can even be reused as removal, Soul Drain, Origin Monks can, more of an aggro card, but it can be used as removal. Wind Soldier, Choking Sands, what else do we have down here? Last Nightmare, the big daddy of removal, just straight up hard removal. Doomsday, global removal, not used much, but it still is an option. So removal is going to be important, and it very much depends how you build your deck, because your win condition is probably going to dictate to you what removal options you can use, because you're going to be locked into specific colors. So if you decide to go for, let's say for example, you decide to go for kind of like an Ice Rock Behemoth win condition, you're going to be locked into red-blue, which is actually not bad for a control deck, because you have the soft removal options. You don't get access to hard removal like Last Nightmare, but you get access to transform effects. But you also get the red cards as well, so you get stuff like Flame Burst and Firestorm. So yeah, colors will very much depend on what removal options you have. But that doesn't mean that blue and green are not good control colors. It just means they have different assets they offer to the control strategy. So 3 things control decks need: win condition, which we just talked about previously, removal, we've just covered now. The last thing, resource cards. Now I've actually split the resource cards into 3 different types: draw, Faeria, and land. So resource cards are going to help you speed up your win condition, and this very much depends on what your win condition is, but I will go through some of the options. So let's go for draw. Now green doesn't have a lot of access to draw, it's not one of the color's main assets. However, blue has a lot of access to draw. It can draw cards from stuff like Shifting Tides, Lore Thieves are another one you see in control decks and combo decks. What else do we have? Tail of the Old Turtle, it does draw cards, but Lore Thief is one of the primary ones. And why is this important? Like I said, you want to draw cards to find more answers to your opponent's questions. Your opponent's going to ask a lot of questions with creatures and events and structures, and you're going to need answers to them. You're going to need to be able to dig for them. And blue is very good at offering that for you in terms of card draw. Yellow also has some options as well, mainly through Kaleem's Prayer. But blue is kind of the big daddy when it comes to drawing cards. Now the next thing that comes under the resource category is Faeria. How can you generate or cheat Faeria to gain additional economy, gain additional resources to help you pay for those expensive cards? Blue, once again, is also very good at this. Blue can use stuff like Library, which is the best of both worlds. It gives you Faeria and card draw, so it's fantastic. Library is a very good option for that, but very expensive in land, so you have to build your deck around it. Gathering Cistern, not the best, but it does give you a Faeria advantage. You pay for Faeria, and you'll eventually accumulate 9 Faeria over time. So again, time being a very big consideration when putting that card in your deck. And what I think one of the bigger economy cards, Windfall. Pay 10 Faeria, gain 12. So you're paying 10 Faeria to gain an additional 2 Faeria. It may not seem like much, but you can cheat the cost of this card by reducing it with other cards, like Spring Mochi, for example. So Spring Mochi, next card you cost, the next card you draw that costs 7 will have a free cost reduction. And you often see Windfall in decks with Gemshell Tortoise, 2 cost reduction. So you draw 2 copies of Windfall at 8. You then spend 16 Faeria, but get 24 Faeria back. So that's something to consider. Resource cards, how to generate additional Faeria. Red has a different way of doing this. Let me just quickly cover green. So green has mainly one option for resources, and that's Feed the Forest. Destroy your own creature, gain Faeria equal to its life, and draw a card. We've seen this card time and time again in mono green, and again, much like the Forbidden Library, it's checked by its land requirement. But red handles its Faeria management in a different way. So red's main way of doing this is by the bargain archetype. Bloodsong is a good example. Reduce the cost of a random card in your hand by 4 times. Deal 4 damage to yourself. So you pay 4 Faeria for an 8 Faeria cost reduction, basically. But it's spread randomly across your hand. Ogre Dance, you pay 4 Faeria to reduce the cost of a card in your hand by 7. So you pay 4 Faeria for a 3 Faeria cost reduction. Depending if you get the maximum value of it, there's a bit of variance attached to this. And much like the Bold Bargainer, who you often see in the same deck as the Ogre Dance. And this has been a popular archetype for a lot of control decks that have used red. Just being able to cheat the greed. If you have a lot of greedy cards in your deck, you can cheat it out. Red Devil's also a fantastic economy card, one of my favorites in red. 9 Faeria for the 6/4, so you get a good creature, gift, gain 5 Faeria. So you're essentially paying 4 Faeria for a 6/4. Not bad at all. Krog is another example, a random card in your hand is reduced by 7, so an Ogre Dance built into a combat trick. So green has a very strong one in Feed the Forest, but it's very restricted. Blue has a lot more options, Forbidden Library being one of the best, but again very restricted by its lands. Red has also very good Faeria resource cards, but unfortunately it's, well, not even unfortunately, it's checked by its variance. Variance is its kind of downfall. Yellow has a few things going for it, not too much though. You could say like Deathwish Ghoul is a card that gives you economy, but not really that good for control. Soul Pact is very good. 0 Faeria, gain 2 Faeria. You're trading card advantage for economy advantage with this card. You're basically trading the cards for 2 Faeria. But when it comes to resources for Faeria, red and blue are 2 of the best. Now the last type of cards for resources I'm going to talk about, which every deck does have access to, is lands. So cards like Chaos, Aurora's Dream, they're going to cost you a lot of lands. You need 5 lands to get this out. So the best way to accelerate your lands is to use the elemental cards. So Water Elemental, Wood Elemental, Fire Elemental, Air Elemental all generate a land when they come into play, and this will obviously help you get towards that win condition. Now the color that has the best kind of land generation, you could say, is green. We have Wild Growth, create a forest at random. Vine Wall, create a forest at random. Earthcraft used to be good, not so much anymore, but it does generate a special land. You have your Wood Elemental as well. There's also a Seed Sower. Not seen much. I really wish this card got played more. If this was a 5/6, I think it would. But yeah, just create an adjacent forest at random. And then you have stuff like Tarim. Make everything a forest. But yeah, so the green is the land ramp color. And that's where we've often seen colors like blue-green coming together. Help that land acceleration to get those big win conditions. And you also get access to wonderful cards like Shifting Octopus and the Frog Tosser, which is removal. One thing green is definitely lacking in, and blue can help cover. Alright, so just go over what your control deck needs. A win condition, removal, and resource cards depending on what your win condition is. If you need lands, you're going to need land ramp. If you're playing a lot of greedy stuff, like Magnus or Day of the Dragons, you're going to need Faeria, so blue and red can help you out there. And card advantage, hand advantage, and generating more cards just to help you manage your opponent's threats. Alright, so we covered a lot about how to build a control deck, what a control deck is and what it needs in order to function. Now we're going to build a control deck, and I've decided that I want to build a mono red control because it has a lot of the things that a control deck might need. It has it can have win conditions, has a lot of removal options, also has resource generating options as well. So I've decided I'm going to build a mono red control using the bargain package for economy. My win condition is going to be Meteor. We're going to have Meteor as my one win condition, and then we're going to have a backup win condition with the Baldarian. So we're going to be playing very defensive, very reactive, and then we're going to try and just nuke our opponent's lands and finish things off. I may even add Yakapult as another win condition. Now, I didn't talk about Yakapult before, but Yakapult is a win condition. It has a high land cost, very powerful effect as well. So I may add a couple of Yakapults in just to help things out, so we can like nuke our lands, and then we can use the Yakapult from afar and push. Just a few ideas I'm playing with. So let's get into the core part of the deck. So we want to find our win cons first. So we're going to play 2 Meteors. And then we are going to play Baldarian. Actually, I might just play Hellfire. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it, personally. So Baldarian and Meteor are our primary win conditions. Is there anything else I could do? I could add Grappling Hook. Grappling Hook's not a terrible option. But it's not a very good bargain card. And I guess that's my issue with Yakapult in some ways. It's not a very good bargain card. Whereas Hellfire is much better. Okay, so there are win conditions. Let's start adding some removal. Now, we are going to bargain, which means this is going to dictate our deck building a little bit. So we are relying on a 7 Faeria cost reduction from the Ogre Dance and the Bold Bargainer. Which means that we don't want a lot of cheap cards because we won't get maximum value from the Ogre Dance. So we're going to have to be quite greedy with our removal. So let's put in the Ogre Dance and the Bold Bargainer. So for removal options, we're going to be relying on the hefty stuff like Garadan. Garadan is going to feature in deck. Firestorms as well. Ground Shakers for sure. Havoc. Another one that's going to we're going to need as well. So we have a lot of removal options now. We have Firestorm, Havoc, Ground Shakers, Garadan. Meteor doubles up as removal, and also Baldarian can help us out as well if we need it. We also need creatures as well. I actually didn't cover this in what a control deck needs, which is pretty funny. Creatures, you're going to need creatures that collect Faeria. But that's kind of a given. Faeria is all about controlling the wells and gaining resources. So I didn't specifically cover that, I guess you could say. But yeah, you're going to need some Faeria harvesters. Now, what else could we bargain? That's what I want to look at. We can get more economy from the Red Devil. I'm a big fan of this card, actually, so I'm going to put it in. We can put the Ogre Battler in as well. That's a really good defensive card. It's going to help us defend. It's got Taunt. Very big in stats. Good stuff. That's good stuff. So, Faeria Harvesters, I already know what I'm going to opt for. It's going to be Divine Guardian. Divine Guardian's such a good card, especially in control. It basically can't be targeted, which means it's not going to be removed, and it's going to just sit there and happily collect Faeria for us. It's a little sad because it doesn't really interact with the bargain stuff, but we have to make sacrifices somewhere in order to be able to play the deck, I guess. Shadow Silk Faeria, this is... Oh, okay. I didn't even think of this. Shadow Silk Faeria. I'm going to put 2 of these in as well. Double Collective, we play it on the wells. Also, if it goes onto our opponent's lands, we're able to draw more removal options. It's pretty good. I do want to get Magnus in here. Magnus is really good in bargain strategies because the cards that you draw from the combat trigger could be very expensive and could really help. Now, Radiance may be a consideration for a bargain deck, but it doesn't really work. And the reason is Radiance Faeria cost equals your life. This is very important. Radiance's cost can never change. It will always be whatever your life is, no matter how many times you bargain it. So don't play Radiance in any cost reduction based strategies. Well, you can play it in a cost reduction strategy, just not really bargain because it's all built around that. So I'm going to get Magnus in here. I'm just going to see if there's anything else that catches my eye. Baron's usually very good in control decks as well. Again, we are more likely to draw something very impactful and very expensive just by the nature of our deck. I don't think there's anything else I really want in here. And as you can see, the Faeria cost of this is huge. And not all control decks will be like this. The Faeria cost of control decks will vary. depending on what your win condition is and how you build your deck. We do cheat this quite a bit with the bargain cards. Yeah, so Green Yellow Sacrifice will be cheaper on its Faeria curve, whereas like a bargaining deck, we're using like that Faeria cost reduction. So don't pay too much attention to this. I don't know the exact math behind how much our reduction reduces this. That would take me quite some time to figure out. But I wouldn't worry too much. This deck is pretty greedy. We're trying to get away with a lot here. So I need to make 2 cuts. And we have a lot of lands. We need to build 5 lands. So we could use Fire Elementals, but I'm not keen on Fire Elemental in the control deck because of its stats. It just gets easily removed. I'm going to drop... See, these might not even work. I don't even know. But they don't have land requirements, which is also very nice. What do we want to get rid of? I'm going to get rid of one Ogre Battler. And one Red Devil. Okay, we'll go with that. So this is just bargain. So this is the deck. This is its first draft. One thing about deck building is you're gonna have to play it, play your deck, figure out what works and what doesn't, and then refine the deck after. So we're gonna take this into a match where I'm gonna discuss some of the strategy of control decks, how you build your lands, but also things you'll need to consider as a control player. Control decks have a few decisions in how they approach matchups. Specifically, more so when you're playing against other control decks. I think that's the more difficult one to figure out sometimes. But yeah, let's get into a match and we'll discuss control with its strategies and some of the tips. I'll give you some tips on how to play them. All right, we're into a match here. Let's talk a little bit about our strategy. So we're going to be building from the side of our orb, and we're going to be collecting off our own wells, forcing our opponent to come to us. That's actually not a bad hand at all. All right. So yeah, we're going to be building around here. Eventually, we will push up to defeat our opponent, but for now, we're just defending. We just want to collect as much Faeria as possible. The Shadow Silk Faeria was a sad draw there. I was going to Ogre Dance, but I won't be able to do that now. Let's go for a Baron. So Baron costs 6 Faeria. When it dies, we're going to both draw cards, and they're going to cost 0. I'm hoping I get Meteor. That's the game plan with Baron and the King, to get 0 cost Meteors and just nuke lands and make our opponent start from the beginning. It's Shaitan Demon. So this is probably a tempo strategy. So yeah, we're just gonna wait here, and we're gonna play the Shadow Silk next turn, and then we're gonna Ogre Dance. But yeah, you're gonna want to build from your orb. You want to collect off your own wells. If you can get into double collection, sure, fine, crack on. But I wouldn't prioritize it too much. You want to be defending your orb as much as possible. This is going to be a mobility trick. No mobility, okay. Ooh, Havoc. Hello. We have Garadan coming up. That's pretty good. So yeah, let's get the Shadow Silk down. If I Shadow Silk now... will I be one? I will be able to collect... I'll be able to Garadan on the follow-up if this gets clear. So if I play Shadow Silk here, and then like the Demon moves here, the Manta Rider moves down, and then they kill it, I'll be able to Garadan on the follow-up. But I could just take the bargain as well, and then if I hit Bold Bargainer, I get to play another creature. So there's a few decisions to make here. I feel like I'm going to roll the dice on the dance. Just why my hand's so good. Oh, that's absolutely fine as well. Okay. So you're building on your own wells. You're defending. When eventually the goal is your opponent just runs out of gas, so they don't have much Faeria to use on a turn. They don't have board control anymore, and that's when you can make your push up. And then once you're in control and you have initiative, you're able to just kill the creatures that come down, or just overwhelm them with these very powerful creatures. Now, one thing I'd like to touch on about control is control mirrors. Control mirrors are kind of complex in some ways, mainly based on their strategy. Like, the biggest question to ask from a control mirror is how do you recognize you have to be the proactive player instead of the reactive player? And that comes down to the style of deck and the answers you have. It takes a bit of meta knowledge, really, to understand that. You need to be able to understand exactly, what your opponent's win conditions can potentially be, and if your win condition can match that if you do stay down here and collect. Now, in some control matchups, this will take a lot. This will just take experience, and this will just take playing your deck more. You might decide, okay, I'm playing her against, for example, a green-yellow sacrifice. Is green-yellow sacrifice's win condition better than mine? Can I manage Soul Eaters? If the answer is yes, you have Last Nightmares and Fortifies and stuff like that. Can you... Oh, it's just going to smoke me? Yeah. Can you hold off? And can you kill those creatures, those Soul Eaters? And if the answer is yes, then probably you can just chill back here. But if the answer is no, you're more than likely going to have to move up and maybe take a more aggressive route up the side in order to kill your opponent before they can pull off their win condition, which maybe counters yours. So there's a lot going on here. Maybe I shouldn't play the game. I'm kind of lost in myself. Right. I have Havoc. I can kill this with Havoc. That's fine. Shall we? Let's see what the old Baron finds us. Yeah. Well, it happens. This part... I'm just accepting that for what it is. It's part of the deck, unfortunately. The variants. But yeah, we can Havoc this. Very nice. Get the Flying Guardian down. I'm going to go for +1. We have all our lands. We have Garadan now, which is kind of acting as a win condition in itself. I can push for 6 damage next turn, make a land, make Groundshaker. So while I have Meteor as my specific win condition, it doesn't necessarily mean I have to win with Meteor. I just have to win with whatever I can. And in this situation, it's going to be Garadan. Boulder Run. That's really good. Okay. So we can collect, go up to 7, hit for 6. That's pretty good. Then, maybe Mountain into aggro Groundshaker. If we do that, our opponent be on 10. And then we have Lethal. So we force a reaction from our opponent. The only problem I have is I can take 3 damage. Maybe there's a mobility trick and then this kills me. So actually we have a better win condition here. So if we go for the... Yeah, so if we go for the aggressive play and then we play Baldarian instead... Even if this gets killed, now, we can set up Lethal on its own with Baldarian. Because Baldarian can move onto this desert, get the hammer, and then we can hit for 5 and then throw the hammer. So we have Lethal with this. If we played the Groundshaker, we wouldn't have Lethal if the opponent answered the Garadan. So that's another thing about control decks as well, which I think can be quite difficult. And especially it was quite difficult when I first started playing Faeria, is identifying when you go for your win. Oh, is he going to kill my Divine Guardian? I think so. He's considering it. So yeah, in this situation, I identified that Garadan could push 6 damage, and then I could set up an aggressive land for the Baldarian win condition. So actually, it's more that Baldarian's setting up the win here, if Garadan gets answered. So Baldarian's the backup plan. And as you can see, like, I did just build here, you know, I just built up my orb, and I defended, and then I looked for an opportunity to sneak that win. Now, some games, these opportunities won't be so obvious. The Garadan line here took me a bit of, you know, I needed to kind of work it out. Originally, I was going to play Groundshaker, which wasn't a good option. But the Baldarian, you know, there we have it. So there's a victory there. Yeah, the Baldarian definitely showing the win there. I'm pretty sure that my opponent didn't have an answer to Garadan anyway. But yeah, that gives you kind of an example of defensive play, you know, the reactive play, and going for that win. Let's play one more match, and we'll talk about some other strategies within Control. Alright guys, it's another match, but we'll also have a little chat about matchups. I think there's something to be covered there. I'm actually going to keep this. I quite like this hand. I can... Actually, I'm playing second. It's not as good. If I had to explore, it would be a lot better. Let's actually throw this. Oh, that was much worse. I was hoping to find Divine Guardian in Mulligan there. One of the problems with playing so greedy is you can get clunky hands, especially if your opponent's aggro, and this is what I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about rush decks. Now, rush is the checks and balances for Control and Greed. Rush decks' primary goal, I think, in a design space is to make sure that Control decks don't get too out of hand. Control decks don't get to do what they want. Oh, that's interesting. And in Faeria, Yellow Rush especially is very good at checking certain types of control decks, whereas Red Rush is good at checking other types of control decks. It very much depends on what the control deck's trying to do. But aggro is the kind of natural counter. Or Rush is a natural counter to a control deck. Now, some control decks are more geared to fight Rush, but the more you tweak your deck to fight Rush, the worse it'll be in other matchups. So you have to find that fine balance of being able to answer Rush and also play the strategy that you want to play. You don't want a deck that you may not even play against to dictate how you build your deck. Now, for example, that's a very good tempo play there from our opponent. For example, our... Oh, wow, okay. Hang on, let me just think about this. I might have the Firestorm here. Or I could just take all the damage and Meteor and start from the beginning, but I don't think my opponent will play anything else. If I Firestorm for 6... I'll have 2 left over, and then I can Havoc this, but I'll probably be in the same miserable position I was in last turn. So maybe I go for a Bargainer instead, and then try to hit this with the Bargainer, then Firestorm everything. Let's do it. Oh, that kind of worked out. Oh, we'll do this now then. Thank you very much. So yeah, so one control deck that does pretty well against Yellow Rush, specifically, is Green Yellow Sacrifice, because Bone Collectors are just such a pain. Like, there's such a pain to answer. They're very difficult to deal with. So that's why we see Green Yellow Sacrifice having a decent matchup against Yellow Rush. Whereas a greedy deck like this needs very specific answers. Especially now Demonic Salmon is the go-to rush card rather than the Monk. The Monk was answered by Groundshaker, which is fantastic. But now that Salmon gains that +1/+1, it's not as good as it was. I'm going to have to Meteor my own lands. Yep, we're going to be Meteoring this turn. Feels bad I have to Meteor my own lands, and I can't make a land first. But yeah, I think sometimes you just have to drop a rock on someone. Alright, let's just stick it here, I guess. Bye! Now, this is pretty good for us, actually. I'm going to move this. Do I move this in double collection? Probably not. Because our opponent has to rebuild not only the economy, the Faeria, but also the lands again. So it gives us a bit of time. So we've actually got initiative back, which is awesome. I'm going to take the land here. We're just going to chill. And then we can react to the next threat. So I'm hoping the Zealous Crusader comes down because I can just havoc it. Just die, kill the Crusader, carry on collecting Faeria. Unfortunately, he is a monk. Prayer, so that's going to rebuild some of the resources back that was lost. Into a Lost Explorer. Okay. Ground Shaker. Oh, Ogre Battler's pretty good. Yeah, we'll go for the Battler. Just ignore that lake. That was me, like... I do this sometimes, not very often, but sometimes subconsciously I kind of know where the lands are, and sometimes I click the wrong land. It's just a mind game, guys. It's just a mind game. Another prayer. So this is one of the problems like Red has against Yellow Rush in some ways. It's just like the little bits of chip damage that add up. With no healing, it kind of sucks. I really need to... Oh, build land for me, thank you. I was going to build a land here, but now I don't need to. Yeah, I really need to move this into the center. That's what's important here. I have to kill this, actually, because this is lethal. Alright, let's take our last land. I can't believe I did that. Yeah. It's kind of, like I said, this is a subconscious thing. So I'm really holding out. I did stabilize, but the follower made things very difficult for me because it dealt damage. My life is not a resource anymore. And that's another thing we could talk about. Using your life as a resource. Sometimes you can just take some damage. And it takes time to learn when you can take damage, I guess. And sometimes it's not always the right decision. I've made decisions where I'm like, yeah, I can soak some damage this turn, and then the next turn, I didn't actually have a follow-up to stop it. Okay. Now we're in business, guys. Well, maybe. We're maybe in business. Let's take another Bold Bargainer. Hit the Havoc. Go for +1. Let's just clear this out. Leaving this in the middle to just taunt up. And in this situation which I mentioned, my life is not a resource. I have 4 life. I am very much in range of dying to all the haste options that Yellow Rush has. So hopefully my opponent doesn't have a lot of good options. Like, this isn't great. Now, Divine Guardian makes life a little better. That's awesome. Okay. And I can get Baldarian down as well. Sweet. So we're going to Havoc this for 0. I think that's fine. We're going to double neutral in here. Set up Divine Guardian into double collection. This doubles up as a way to double collect once this dies. We're actually going to move on to these deserts as well, make things difficult. But also, I want to protect myself. So now I can't just take like an easy lethal. And this is our weakest creature, so let's put the Baldarian here. And then we can get that hammer. And I'm going to start building lands towards my opponent soon and try and set up something to start chipping some damage away. We can only defend for so long. I finally stabilized. I'm in a good position. I'm hoping to pick up another Ogre Battler so I can drop an Ogre Battler to back this one up. And then we can start really getting a creature up here, like a Ground Shaker. A Ground Shaker would be ideal to start chipping away. So Divine Guardian's given us some time, even now if this gets removed and some haste creatures do poke away at us. So we definitely have time to work with. Finding another Divine Guardian could be quite good once this gets cracked up and can replay it. Ogre Dance, that's a really good option. Alright, let's Ogre Dance now instead of drawing. because we are going to build lands. Havoc, that's absolutely fine. Let's get this. Yeah, we're going to build... neutrals here. Gives us 2 good options. Yeah, and we're just gonna sit here. Sit everything. We've got all our creatures on the lands. Now, I can still die. I can still very much die to Yellow Rush at this point. It very much depends on what removal options are available. You could see like Last Nightmare come down here, or maybe a Crystal Flower into like follow a hit. This dies into Wind Soldier. Or maybe Wind Soldier Demonic Salmon kills the Divine Guardian, and I'll have 1 life left if the Demonic Salmon hits last, and then another haste creature can finish me off. Gonna see a Wind Soldier hit the Divine Guardian. So my opponent going for a more defensive line here, and also respecting the Divine Guardian. But I just found another one. Interesting. I don't have a good creature to play up there, which is kind of funny in a way. I think I play another Divine Guardian here because my opponent has shown that it's difficult for them to remove it. I'll take another draw because I'm just trying to find a Ground Shaker. I don't want to play Garadan up here, not if I can't kill anything. I still don't know if I can win this game. I'm completely unsure. But this is a point in a control match against aggro where you stabilize. You know, the Meteor helped me stabilize. I was kind of lucky I had the Battler to defend and stuff. Monk coming down, gonna move there, that's fine. So now Garadan is a good option for aggro, because I can kill something. Which is the most important thing. Lost Explorer. The value. Do I have enough Faeria? Currently, no. I have to collect with something. So like Balderon, or Baldarian, sorry. Can come here. Just shimmy these over. So now Garadan is my win condition, much like we did in the last match. I'm going to move Garadan up here, and eventually it's going to get to here, and I'm going to start beating away at my opponent. I have so many good removal options as well for passive plays. What I mean by passive is anything that's not haste and hit my face at this point. I have Havoc, I can kill a massive Zealous Crusader, I have Firestorm, I can just melt a lot of little creatures that come down. Divine Guardian's holding the line with the Ogre Battler for me. I'm hoping to pick up another Ogre Battler in the future. I do believe we only run 2 in this, so it might be worth bumping up the Ogre Battlers if we're playing against a lot of Rush. And that's where the deck tweaking comes in. You're kind of having to think about what's the meta like in your current rank. If there's loads of Rush, you're going to want more taunts. You're going to want more defense. It will be at the cost of maybe making your deck less powerful in its win condition, but it's going to be worthwhile because you're going to fend off the more popular decks within your ladder. But yeah, there's things to consider. Right now, I feel this deck's okay. It's hard for me to determine. I don't have like a big enough sample pool of what I need in order to make this deck better suited for the meta. Oh, hi. Hi, Zealous Crusader. I hope you like Havoc. So there we have it. Just gonna throw in the towel there. It's just gonna Havoc it. Hit it with the Baldarian, lock off the protection, and then move Garadan up into that aggressive position. But there we have it. There's some examples, some games with a control deck I just built on the fly. Obviously, the bargain strategy has existed for some time, so my experience with Faeria has given me the insight I need to build a deck like that quite quickly. And that's one of the key things with deck building. It just takes practice. It just takes getting that experience, trying things out. But hopefully this guide will help you build some really cool control decks. And that wraps up my deck building guide for the control archetype. I am a massive fan of control in Faeria. It's probably my favorite archetype, simply because I feel like control utilizes Faeria's core fundamentals as a game, and that's what I really appreciate about the game anyway, so it really is a really fun archetype to play. Control mirrors can be a bit of a grind, I will admit, but that's kind of the nature of the archetype. But overall, I just love control. I'm a big fan. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, drop a subscribe to keep up to date of when our content goes live. Speaking of control, I did play a couple of control decks recently. Teddy's Blue-Yellow Events is a control deck. It does build from the side of your orbs. It does kind of chill out, waits around, builds up these massive disciples, uses its removal to reduce the cost of its Colossus, and then it eventually pushes up with a bit of mobility and yeah, goes to win the game. So that's a good example of a control deck from a very, very solid deck builder. So until next time, guys, take care and enjoy my deck building guide for control.